On the very day of my son's 29th birthday, the only gift he demanded was for his father to disappear from his life forever. He shouted it in front of his friends, turning me, a 64-year-old father who had sacrificed his entire life, into a laughingstock in the backyard. But he did not know that very sentence was the beginning of a plan that would make him lose everything: his house, his freedom, and even his last ounce of trust. Before I continue telling the whole truth, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments. If you were in my shoes, would you stay silent and endure humiliation, or would you stand up and give your son a lesson he would never forget? Your support is the driving force that keeps me exposing the stories many wish to hide. My name is Harold Whitaker, 64 years old, a retired construction engineer living quietly in a suburban home in Portland, Oregon. I once thought I had already weathered the greatest storms of life, losing my wife to cancer, enduring chronic back pain from 40 years of construction work. Yet nothing could prepare me for the shock on my son Colin's 29th birthday. I still remember that afternoon vividly. On the kitchen table sat a chocolate cake I had baked myself, covered with smooth ganache, carrying the aroma of cocoa Colin had loved since childhood. Beside it lay a small wooden box, inside an Omega watch from the 1960s, an heirloom passed down from his grandfather to me. My plan was simple: light 29 candles, then surprise him with both the cake and the watch, telling him, "You are truly grown now, and it is your turn to preserve the family's values." But I did not expect the gift Colin wanted was neither the watch nor the birthday cake. The sliding glass door to the backyard stood ajar, letting in the sounds of pop music and the scent of burgers on the grill. I stopped, the chocolate cake trembling in my hands, the glossy frosting tilting dangerously as though a single breath could send it sliding off the plate and shattering on the tile. Outside, Colin stood among his friends. Trevor and Logan, familiar faces I had never trusted, lounged by the speakers. Chloe, his girlfriend, was busy taking selfies with a beer can. "This old engineer always wants to control my life like it's a construction blueprint," Colin said loudly, his voice slurred with alcohol, but sharp enough to be clear. The group burst into laughter. Trevor chimed in, "Yeah, classic boomer. Bet he's even got a spreadsheet planning your life from A to Z." Laughter cut through like a knife. I stood frozen, my hands shaking so hard the frosting quivered on the cake. Colin tilted back the beer bottle, drained it, then slammed it down on the table. His voice rang out, loud enough to drown the music. "Honestly, the best birthday gift for me would be if you disappeared from my life forever." The air went silent for a second before erupting in cheers. Logan even raised his phone to record, like it was a moment worth posting on TikTok. And me, his father, stood only a few steps away. My heart punched raw, memories slicing through like blades. When he was 7, I carried him to the emergency room on a freezing night, my shirt soaked in sweat, but holding him tight so he would not shiver. When he was 16, I wore a back brace, yet still drove all night for his basketball game, only to hear his joyous shout the next morning when he scored his first three-pointer. When he was 22, I drained my savings to cover his credit card debt, and comforted him not to blame himself. I had believed those moments were bricks, building a strong father-son bond. But now every ounce of pain and every hard-earned dollar was erased by one cold sentence spoken before his friends. I heard Chloe giggle. "Colin, you're so cruel." Yet she did not sound disapproving. She sounded admiring. That laugh was the final stab. I looked at the watchbox in my hand, the heirloom passed down through 3 generations. Suddenly it felt heavy, meaningless. I let it drop onto the rug, the dry thud marking the end of a chapter. I turned away, leaving behind the music, the laughter, and my son. In the kitchen, glowing with yellow light, the cake I placed on the table looked pitiful, its shiny frosting beginning to melt. I sank into a chair, holding my forehead. The searing pain in my chest was not illness. It was something more poisonous. betrayal. That night, when the microwave clock hit 7:30, I realized one thing. Perhaps it was time for me to truly disappear, but not in the way Colin wanted. The backyard music still blared, as though his cruel words had been nothing but a drunken joke. But to me, they rang crystal clear, each syllable carved into my bones. I peeked through the curtain. The backyard glowed with string lights, balloons dangling, tables littered with Bud Light cans and stale nachos. None of them knew the lights, the speakers, the tiled patio had been set up by me. I thought I was creating a surprise for my son, but instead, I had built the stage for my own humiliation. Colin stood in the middle, hands in his pockets, leaning with arrogance. Trevor slapped his shoulder, laughing hard. "Epic, bro!" saying it straight in front of us all. "Respect?" Logan filmed eagerly, eyes gleaming at a moment bound for 1 million views. "This on TikTok will blow up. A son kicking his dad out of his life on his birthday. Classic." The others roared, banging beer cans on the table in rhythm like a cheer. I could not tell if my hands shook from rage or sorrow, but I knew the truth was exposed. To Colin, I was not a devoted father, only a burden, a control freak. "Colin!" Chloe's shrill, careless voice cut through. "You're cruel, but I love it." She smiled, clinking her beer can against his like it was a medal. I staggered back, bracing against the wall to stay upright. The dim kitchen light down stretched my shadow long and crooked on the tile like a stranger in his own home. Through the glass, I caught sight of a figure at the fence. Douglas Reed, my neighbor of more than 20 years. He stood still, arms folded, eyes fixed in disbelief. God, even the neighbor had heard. The shame was no longer confined to the backyard. It had become a theater for the whole neighborhood. Then I heard Colin's mocking voice again. He thinks throwing some money around buys affection. These speakers, the beer, the burgers, he calls that love. But really, it's just control. Trevor jumped in, drumming a rhythm as though rapping. "Dad, I don't need cake. I don't need candles. I don't need your old watch. All I need is for you to disappear." Laughter exploded, echoing across the yard. Another young man shouted, "Speech! Speech! Let the old man give a speech." I felt my legs go limp. My heart seemed to drop to the floor. In that moment, I no longer felt like the owner of the house or Colin's father, but like an uninvited guest, the butt of a drunken crowd's joke. I remembered when my wife was alive, she used to say, "You're too kind, Harold." Our son will never fully appreciate these sacrifices. I still believed love would be enough for him to recognize them, but I was wrong. Her death left a void I thought I could fill by caring twice as much. Now I understand. The more I gave, the more I erased myself in his eyes. In the darkness behind the curtains, I heard myself whisper, "God, Mary, if you were still alive, how heartbroken you would be." I turned and stepped back into the kitchen. The watchbox lay there abandoned at my feet. I bent down and picked it up. The watch face gleamed coldly under the light. 3 generations of Whittaker men had worn it as a family symbol. I meant to give it to Colin to continue the tradition, but now I knew it would only become a joke for his friends. A tear slipped down the glass and spread like a crack. I wiped it hastily, but my trembling hand made the wooden box pop open and the watch inside slide, the glass throwing off a cold gleam. The hinges creak in the quiet kitchen sounded like something deep inside me breaking. Outside, the music rose again, the Marshall speakers roaring, drowning out the cruel moment that had just passed. But I could not erase it. The words disappear forever, repeated in my head, beat by beat, like a hammer driving a stake. I understood this moment to be the lowest depth of all I had ever sacrificed, and from that depth, something in me began to change. I sat in the kitchen, my back pressed to the wooden chair, my cold hands clutching the open watch box. Laughter and chatter and music swelled outside, but inside me there was only a viscous, suffocating emptiness. Every sound that reached my ears was like another hammer blow to my shredded pride. For a moment, I thought, Maybe I should stay here, silent as a ghost, and let them do as they pleased? But then I saw the watch glass flash under the kitchen light, a cold light that seemed to say to me, Harold, you have been silent too long. If you stay silent any longer, you will cease to be yourself. I sprang up and walked straight to the sliding door. The hinge squealed as it opened, cutting through the music. The yard seemed to drop half a beat. All eyes turned to me, an old man with gray hair, frosting still smeared on his hands from the abandoned cake, his face carved with humiliation. Colin, my voice rang out, hoarse but clear. I need to speak with you privately. He turned, a beer still wobbling in his hand, a mocking smile curling his lips. No need for privacy, Dad. Everyone here already knows. You control, you impose, and now you want to be dramatic? Trevor laughed. Logan quickly raised his phone, lens aimed straight at me. Chloe arched an eyebrow in delight, as if watching a good play. I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice calm. Do you know what you just said? Disappear forever. Do you understand what that means? Colin shrugged and waved his hand as if brushing away smoke. That's exactly what it means. I'm 29. I don't need you hovering over me anymore. Do you think I owe you anything? I never asked you for any of that. Those words hit me like bricks. I felt myself tremble, but not from fear. Trembling from rising rage. I turned to the crowd, the young faces giggling. You're sitting here eating, drinking, shouting, and all of it came from my money and my labor. This house, this yard, the barbecue you're eating from, all come from the hands of an old man you mock. And my son, the boy I carried through the night to save, now tells me to disappear. A murmur swelled. A few faces shifted uneasily, but Trevor laughed loudly. Old man's telling a touching story. Classic boomer. Colin raised a hand to stop his friend, then stared at me. What do you want? For me to apologize in front of everyone? Number. I'm just telling the truth. If you can't stand it, then don't interfere in my life. I could feel my neighbor Douglas Reed's gaze from beyond the fence. He stood motionless, witnessing everything. This was no longer private humiliation. It was a public trial in my own yard. My voice came out stronger than I expected. You tell me to disappear? Fine, I will disappear. But when I go, everything you enjoy will go with me. If you want to live without your father, you will learn what it truly means to have no father. A strange silence fell. Even Chloe stopped laughing, her eyes wide. Logan lowered his phone as if fearing to miss an unexpected ending. Colin snorted and feigned calm. You trying to scare me? Don't forget this is my house, my friends, my party. What can you do? I looked at him for a long time. In that instant, I knew that if I turned away and stayed silent, it would end here. I would forever be the weak one in my son's eyes. But I also knew this was only the beginning. I set the watch box on the table outside and then turned and walked into the house, leaving behind the scattered laughter and uneasy whispers. A resolve in me was forged into steel. Laughter and music rose again in the yard after I went inside, but to me it was all meaningless noise. I climbed the stairs. Each wooden step creaked under my heavy feet, as if carrying me away from the place where I had just been publicly judged. My bedroom opened in dim light. The familiar room suddenly felt strange. The oak bed, the bookshelf filled with old blueprints, the silver-framed wedding photo of Mary and me on the shelf. They all watched me like silent witnesses. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands buried in my hair. Outside, Colin's laughter rang again among his friends. That sound pierced the wall in my heart, repeating his words. The best gift for me would be if you disappeared forever. I looked at the mirror on the dressing table. A 64-year-old man looked back at me. More gray hair, dark circles under the eyes, shoulders hunched. But what hurt me most was those eyes, the same eyes that once boasted of the bridges and buildings I'd built, now hollow as a pit. I whispered to myself, Harold, How many times have you let him trample your pride? You forgave, you indulged, you hoped, and in return, what did you get? A sentence of exile right in your own home. I turned to look at Mary's photo. In the picture, she smiled gently, her hand on my shoulder. I could almost hear her voice. You're too kind, Harold. But sometimes being too kind means letting people trample you. For the first time in years, my tears did not fall. Instead, a cold current ran down my spine. A thought rose, clear and sharp as a newly honed blade. If he wanted me to disappear, I would disappear. But when I disappeared, he would lose everything. I stood up and opened the drawer of my old desk. Inside was a neat stack of files I had kept. The deed, tax bills, insurance papers, expense lists, even the savings book. Each sheet was proof. Colin's life has been sustained because of me. I turned each page, my hands steadier than they had ever been. Electricity, water, and internet bills. Each month, $347. Home insurance, $1,400. Property tax, $8,500 a year. The car he's driving is in my name. I pay the insurance. Even the phone he uses is on the family contract I signed. I smiled faintly. For years I had built him a castle from paper, and he thought it was his own solid palace. Outside the window, the backyard string lights were blinking. I could see Colin swaying, his hands waving as he told jokes. The group exploded with laughter, raised glasses, and cheers, a chaotic stage I had paid to build. I closed the file gently and slid it into my old leather satchel. Inside me, a small flame had ignited, the flame of resolve, no longer trembling or hesitant. I knew clearly. Tonight was the line. I had stepped out of the role of the ever-sacrificing father. From now on, I would be an architect of truth, and the first blueprint would be the plan to disappear. So Colin would learn what standing on his own meant when there was no one left supporting him. The wall clock struck 3 times, signaling 9 o'clock. I stood up and looked around the room one last time. Everything was familiar, but now each item had become a prop for a new play, one in which I, Harold Whitaker, would no longer be the victim, but the director. Portland grew quiet as the music in the yard wound down, and guests began to leave. I remained in the small upstairs study, the desk lamp casting a pale yellow light over the files spread out like a chessboard. Colin's triumphant laughter still echoed somewhere in my mind, but this time it did not make my heart ache. It sounded more like an alarm, a call to act. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My finger stopped on a name I had saved 3 years ago. Naomi Park, realtor. She had once helped an old colleague sell a house in 5 days. I had never imagined I would need such a service until tonight. The desk clock read 11:47. I hesitated for a few seconds, then dialed. An automated secretary's voice answered, "Hello, Park Real Estate. Please leave a message." I lowered my voice, concise and businesslike, as if I were arranging work rather than issuing a sentence to my own family. "Naomi, this is Harold Whitaker. I need to sell a house in Northeast Portland urgently. Contact me as soon as possible." The sooner the better. I set the phone down and exhaled, not with regret, but with a sense of relief I had not felt in years, as if I had just laid the first brick of a bridge out of the mire. Next was the bank. I opened my laptop and logged into my online accounts. Years as an engineer had trained me to keep every detail. I downloaded all electricity, water, internet bills, property tax records, insurance, and repair invoices. Then I typed each figure into an Excel sheet. The living costs for Colin over the past 3 years totaled more than $140,000. Every dollar from my back, from sweat, from nights of extra work when my back hurt so badly I could hardly stand. I added one final line in bold, all to receive in return the words, "Disappear." A soft sound came from outside. I pulled the curtain and looked down. Colin staggered, carrying the remaining case of beer toward the garage. muttering with dull eyes. That scene only confirmed it. He had never learned how to live on his own. If I did not act, he would keep destroying himself. I returned to the desk and opened another tab, Mobile Storage Services. I booked a small container for delivery on Monday morning. It would be where I would quickly move keepsakes to keep before this house changed hands. On the table, the watch box lay ajar. I took the old Omega and set it in my palm, the metal's cold gleam reflected on my face. A lifetime passed from father to son, yet this time it would not follow that rule. I folded it up and placed it in the locked drawer. Colin would never touch it. Night bled into dawn. When the clock read 4:15, I rose and reviewed the cluttered room of files. I felt like I had returned to my bridge design days. Every detail must fit. Every figure must be precise. Every line calculated. And this time, the structure I was building was not a steel bridge, but a lesson of blood and tears for my only son. I turned off the light and shut the study door. Outside the window, it was still pitch black, but inside me, the dawn had already broken. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains and woke me after a night nearly sleepless. In the kitchen, the drip of Vietnamese-style coffee fell into the glass carafe, a steady rhythm like a countdown. The new day had begun, but for me it was no ordinary day. It was the first day of a different life. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The Excel sheet glowed on the screen. The cold numbers lined up like evidence. $140,000 in 3 years. I sipped the bitter coffee, its bitterness nothing compared to the humiliation Colin had poured onto me last night. The phone vibrated. Naomi Park's name lit the screen. I inhaled deeply and answered, "Mr. Whitaker, this is Naomi. I received your message. You want to sell quickly?" Her voice was brisk and decisive, without frills. I replied shortly, "Yes. I need to sell within 1 month, as quickly as possible. No haggling, no delays." Paper shuffling sounded on the other end. Naomi asked, "Can you tell me the address and the condition of the house?" I read the address. She was silent for a few seconds, then said, "This neighborhood is hot right now. If the house is well maintained, I can arrange photos and list it within 48 hours. But I need to know why you want to sell so quickly. Usually," I cut in, my voice low, "the reason is personal. I just need to make sure the house is out of my hands before someone returns from an unwanted place." Naomi did not press further. Perhaps she had seen enough broken families to accept half answers. "Understood. We'll start immediately. I'll come by to see the house this afternoon at 3 o'clock. After I hung up, I sat still for a few minutes. My heart beat slowly but firmly. The wheels had started. There was no turning back. I stood and walked through the house. Every corner, every object held memories. The oak dining table where Mary once set out apple pies, the beige sofa where Colin used to watch cartoons with his head on my shoulder, the backyard with the swing I had installed myself. All bore the marks of a family, but now they were relics of betrayal. Outside the window, Colin was still passed out in the living room, the stench of beer clinging to the sofa. A can rolled on the floor, sunlight cutting straight across his face, but he did not stir. Seeing him like that made it painfully clear. The boy did not just need a wake-up call. He needed an earthquake to shake him awake. I opened the closet and pulled out an old suitcase. I began packing a few essentials, some clothes, a stack of documents, and a handful of personal keepsakes. The rest I would leave behind. My life had been tied to this house for 3 decades, but I was ready to walk away in just a few days. The doorbell rang. The delivery man dropped off the storage container I'd ordered the night before. He set it down by the curb, signed, and left. I looked at the white metal box and saw inside it the shape of a larger plan taking form. In my mind, Mary's voice whispered clear as day, "Harold, it's time." At exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the bell rang again. I opened the door to find a woman in her 40s, trim in a navy suit, a thick folder in one hand, and a professional camera in the other. Her bright eyes carried the sharpness of someone who had handled hundreds of urgent deals. "Mr. Whitaker?" "Yes, please come in." Naomi stepped inside, her heels tapping confidently on the wood floor. She swept her gaze around, snapping photos and taking notes. I led her through each room, speaking briskly about the roof's age, the floors, the upgrades. We talked like colleagues handling business, neither of us acknowledging Colin snoring on the sofa. We came down to the kitchen. Naomi asked about the electrical system, and I handed her the file. We spread the papers across the dining table. That was when the scrape of a chair echoed. Colin sat bolt upright, hair tangled, eyes bloodshot, reeking of beer. He braced himself on the table, glaring at me and Naomi, his voice gravelly. "Dad, who is this?" "Why did you bring a realtor into my house?" I gave no reply. Naomi did not look at him either, continuing her notes. Colin stepped closer, his voice louder. "Are you deaf?" I asked. "What's going on here?" I turned another page of maintenance bills and answered evenly, "It has nothing to do with you." "This is my business." Naomi caught my meaning and stayed silent, snapping more photos. That calm dismissal turned Colin's face purple. He roared, "You treating me like air?" Then suddenly he swung his arm, sending the entire stack of files flying off the table. Papers scattered in the air, Naomi's camera nearly hitting the floor. Naomi cried out, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" But Colin kept going. He grabbed my shoulder and shoved hard. I staggered into the kitchen cabinet, pain shooting through my back like it was breaking. "You old bastard! You think you can sell the house behind my back?" Colin snarled, his breath thick with alcohol. Naomi stepped forward, raising her hand. "Step back, right now, or I'll call the police." But Colin, crazed, shoved her arm aside. Naomi lost balance, crashing against a chair, her papers scattering across the floor. The kitchen rang with the crash of furniture, her muffled groan, and my heartbeat pounding like a drum. I braced myself against the counter, staring into my son's eyes. Mary's words rang in my head. Sometimes being too kind only means letting yourself be trampled. I did not hesitate. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling with fury but steady. "This is Harold Whitaker, 1123 Northeast Portland. My son is assaulting me and has attacked the realtor. We need the police immediately." Colin sneered, but fear flickered in his eyes. "You dare call the cops on me?" Naomi rose, her voice sharp as steel. "I'm a witness." "I'll testify to everything." The front door creaked open. There stood Douglas Reed, the neighbor, arms folded, face stern. He raised his voice to cut through Colin's shouts. "I saw everything." "I'll be a witness." 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed outside. 2 officers stepped in, voices firm. "Who's causing trouble here?" I pointed directly. "Him. He just assaulted me and attacked Miss Park." Naomi nodded firmly. Douglas Reed added, "I watched the whole thing from the fence." Colin thrashed, yelling, "They set me up." "This is my house." But it was useless. The officers twisted his arms, cuffed him, and hauled him off amid his curses. One officer stated flatly, "You are under arrest for assault and disorderly conduct. You'll be held at least 14 days. The slam of the cruiser door left behind a chilling silence. I stood there, my back aching, my hands trembling. Naomi straightened her jacket, her breathing sharp, but her voice calm. "Mr. Whitaker, from now on we can continue, without interference." I nodded. Through the window I watched the patrol car fade. For the first time in years, I felt this silence was a beginning. The next morning, Portland greeted me with a misty drizzle, drops clinging to the glass like memories refusing to fade. I put on my old coat, opened the garage, and took a deep breath before beginning the work of dismantling my life from this house. The white storage container waited at the curb. I stepped out, unlocked it, and pulled the heavy door open. Inside was a hollow space, echoing like a cavern, ready to swallow the years of my life. This time, there was no snoring, no snide remarks from the sofa. Colin had left in handcuffs the night before, leaving behind a silence so heavy, and strangely, for the first time, it let me breathe easier. I went back inside the house and began choosing what to take. I didn't take much, only what truly could not be left behind. The wooden box with the Omega watch, a few folders of documents, the wool coat Mary bought me for Christmas in 2001, and family photos from when Colin was still a child. I placed each item carefully into cartons, sealed them with tape, and labeled them neatly. The habit of an engineer, everything clear, everything in order. The ripping sound of tape echoed through the kitchen like scissors cutting away old ties. As I sealed each box, I remembered the night before. Colin raging, shouting, then being let out by the police. 14 days, not a long time, but enough for me to carry out a plan he would never see coming. At exactly 1 o'clock, the staging crew Naomi had sent arrived. 3 workers in uniform with toolboxes, silk flowers, and pristine white tablecloths. Naomi came too, composed as if the clash of last night had never happened. When our eyes met, I nodded in gratitude. She returned only a faint smile, enough to say, "We shared the same goal." The sofa got a new cover, a vase of white flowers set on the glass table, and a bright rug stretching from the door to the living room. The scent of vanilla candles spread softly, wiping away the old stench of beer. With Colin gone, the house began to transform, from battlefield to glossy brochure. While the crew arranged the dining table, I quietly carried box after box out to the container. With every step, I felt like nails hammering my resolve in place. The father who once bowed and endured was now the director of a greater plan. By the end of the day, as weak sunlight filtered through the windows, the house gleamed, tidy and almost unfamiliar. I stood in the middle of the room and drew a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt what Mary once called freedom. No more drunken son sprawled on the sofa, no more mocking laughter of his friends in the yard. Only me, Naomi, and a deal ticking forward like the steady hands of a clock. I rested my palm on the newly set dining table and whispered, "Colin, when you come back, this place will no longer be yours." After 2 days of staging, the house in Northeast Portland looked like a jewel. Warm golden lights, new rugs, vases of fresh white flowers on the glass table. Every trace of the chaotic party erased. By the weekend, Naomi held the open house. Streams of strangers walked through, their curious eyes glancing over every room. "This house has been well cared for. The backyard brickwork is beautiful, the living room bright with natural light," a young couple murmured. Another nodded. "At this price, in Northeast Portland, it's rare." Within 2 days, Naomi gathered 4 offers. I sat at the dining table as she laid them out, her voice firm. "The highest is $855,000, with 10% earnest money down. This is the safest option." I picked up the pen, my hand steady. One signature, and the weight lifted from my shoulders. Naomi smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Whitaker. From today, this home belongs to its new owners." On closing day, the young couple received the keys, their faces bright with joy. I stood at the porch and handed them a sealed envelope. "I have one request. If one day a young man comes here claiming this is his home, please give him this envelope. Inside is what he needs to hear." They nodded, asking nothing more. 14 days later, the Portland sky was cold and gray. The doorbell rang. The new husband hurried to answer, finding a disheveled young man with tangled hair and weary eyes after time in jail. "I'm Colin Whitaker. This is my house." "Who are you?" he demanded. The man frowned. "You're mistaken. This house has been sold. My wife and I are the new owners, and Mr. Harold Whitaker asked me to give you something." He pulled an envelope from the entryway drawer and handed it over. On the front, in firm handwriting, "To my son. Colin's hand shook as he tore it open and unfolded the letter. His father's steady words filled the page. Colin, you once told me the best birthday gift would be if I disappeared from your life. So I have done exactly as you wished. This house no longer belongs to us. It belongs to others, proof that you are free and no longer controlled. But freedom comes with responsibility. For years, every bill, every dollar, every brick of your life was carried by me. Now no more. From today, you must stand on your own feet. I leave you no inheritance, only a lesson. Life gives nothing for free. If you want to be a man, you must learn to work, to keep your word, to build your own home with your own hands. Do not look for me. If one day you truly grow, learn to value what you have. Learn to love instead of despise. Then perhaps you will find me, not in a house, but in your own heart. However wayward you are still my son. And a father always hopes his son will change and grow. Remember this, I have always loved you with everything I had. If one day you stand strong, you will understand why today I had to leave. Your father, Harold Whitaker. Colin froze. The letter slipped from his hands and drifted to the porch. Standing before the house that once was his, he suddenly realized the birthday gift he demanded had become the most painful lesson of his life. From that day, I left Portland. My old car carried me along the Oregon coast, past the cliffs Mary and I had once promised to see together. I stopped in Newport, sitting on the sand listening to the waves. I drove on to Seattle, revisiting the steel bridges I had once helped design. At every stop, I took a photograph, not to show anyone, but to mark that, after all, I was still alive, still walking my own path. On the road, I often thought of Colin. Perhaps he was wandering, angry, lost, or still blind. But deep inside, I knew, no matter how flawed, he was still my blood, the son I once carried through freezing nights. My only wish left was not money, not the house I sold, but something simpler, that one day Colin would truly grow up. I do not know if that day will ever come, but I will keep hoping, because hope is the last thing left in a father's heart. And if you feel this story has touched your heart, please hit subscribe and share this video so others may hear it too. Leave a comment about what you would do if you were in my place. Your support is my greatest strength to keep telling the stories so many want to keep hidden.